Nothing says happy marriage like being uninvited to Christmas by your own wife. I'm Porter Kellor, and I manage Henderson's Hardware on Maple Street, the kind of place where folks still shake hands on deals and know each other's names. 39 years old, married for 12, and apparently too boring for holiday festivities. "Don't come for Christmas," Mira said, not looking up from her laptop. She sat at our kitchen table, still in her HR manager blazer, fingers clicking across keys like she was typing my obituary. "My ex will be there and I want to talk to him." I stood there holding 2 cups of coffee, steam rising between us like some kind of barrier. The expensive watch I'd hidden in my sock drawer suddenly felt like a joke. 3 months of overtime at the store, skipping lunches, saving every extra dollar for something special, something that would make her smile the way she used to. "Ty's coming to your parents' house?" I set her coffee down carefully, watching her face. "The same Ty who moved to California 2 years ago?" "He's back in town. We have things to discuss." Her voice carried that crisp, professional tone she used at work, the one that made employees squirm and vendors apologize for existing. "Adult things. You wouldn't understand." Adult things. Right. Because managing inventory, dealing with contractors, and keeping a business profitable for 15 years made me some kind of child. I sipped my coffee and studied my wife of 12 years. When had her auburn hair started looking so perfectly styled even at home? When had she stopped wearing the flannel pajamas I bought her last Christmas? "What kind of things?" I asked. Mira's fingers stopped typing. She looked at me with those green eyes that used to light up when I walked into a room. Now they held the same patience she reserved for explaining company policy to new hires. "Personal things, Porter. History we need to resolve." History. The word hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. Ty Morrison had been Mira's college boyfriend, the guy she'd dated before we met at her friend Lisa's barbecue 13 years ago. Tall, smooth-talking consultant who wore suits that cost more than my monthly salary. He'd moved to California for some tech job, married a lawyer, got divorced, and apparently decided our little Connecticut town was worth revisiting. "Your parents invited him?" "I invited him." Mira closed her laptop with a soft click. "We've been talking." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "Talking about what?" "About us. About what we had. About whether we made the right choices." I set my cup down before I could drop it. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were moving closer together. Our refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked. Normal sounds in a moment that felt anything but normal. "And you need Christmas dinner to figure that out?" "I need space, Porter. Time without you hovering, asking questions, making everything complicated." Hovering. Making things complicated. I worked 50 hours a week, paid the mortgage on time, fixed everything that broke in this house, and apparently my presence at family dinner was hovering. "So I'm supposed to spend Christmas alone while you reconnect with your ex-boyfriend?" Mira stood up, smoothing her skirt. Even at home, she dressed like she might get called into the office at any moment. "You could visit your sister Casey, or go to that bar with Nick. You'll figure something out." She walked toward the stairs, then paused. "Oh, and Porter? Don't make this into some big drama. It's just dinner." Just dinner. With her ex-boyfriend. While I ate Christmas ham alone or imposed on my sister's family. I listened to her heels click up the stairs, heard our bedroom door close, and sat in the kitchen staring at 2 cups of coffee. The watch in my sock drawer had cost me $2,000. I'd special ordered it from a jewelry store in Hartford, white gold with her birthstone engraved with our anniversary date. The sales clerk had smiled when I'd explained it was a surprise, told me how lucky my wife was to have someone who planned ahead. Lucky. That's me. Lucky Porter, the guy who gets uninvited to Christmas so his wife can chat with her ex about their history. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through text messages. 3 weeks of conversations with Mira that read like business correspondence. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Meeting with Lisa tomorrow. Client dinner Friday. Client dinners that lasted until midnight. Meetings that required new dresses and perfume I didn't recognize. Working late at an office that supposedly emptied by 6. My phone buzzed. Text from Nick Brennan, my best friend since high school and the guy who kept my truck running when I couldn't afford a new one. Beer tonight? Jenny's visiting her mother. I typed back. Rain check. Wife just uninvited me to Christmas. 3 dots appeared immediately, then, what the hell? Instead of explaining, I called him. Nick answered on the first ring. Porter? What do you mean uninvited? Exactly what it sounds like. Mira doesn't want me at her parents' house for Christmas dinner. Her ex is coming to town. Silence. Nick was a mechanic, built like a linebacker, with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails and opinions about everything. The silence meant he was choosing his words carefully. The California guy? Ty? That's the one. And she told you not to come because of him? She wants to talk to him about their relationship. Adult things, apparently. Things I wouldn't understand. Jesus, Porter. Nick's voice carried the kind of anger I felt but couldn't quite access yet. How long has she been talking to this guy? I don't know. She didn't say. But you're going to find out. That wasn't a question. Nick knew me well enough to understand that I didn't accept incomplete information. When customers brought broken tools to the store, I didn't guess at solutions. I took them apart, examined every piece, figured out exactly what went wrong and why. Yeah, I said. I'm going to find out. After hanging up, I sat in the kitchen until the coffee went cold. Upstairs, I could hear Mira moving around, probably getting ready for another late meeting. The house felt different now, like I was seeing it clearly for the first time in months. The living room where we used to watch movies together, before she started staying late at the office. The dining room where we'd hosted friends before those friends stopped calling. The bedroom where we used to talk about everything, before conversations became status updates about schedules and obligations. When had I become a stranger in my own life? I walked upstairs and found Mira in front of her vanity mirror, applying makeup with the precision of someone preparing for battle. She'd changed into a black dress I'd never seen before. Going out? I asked. Dinner with Lisa. We're planning the holiday schedule. Lisa Hartwell, Mira's friend from college and current co-worker. The same Lisa who'd introduced us 13 years ago, who'd been maid of honor at our wedding, who'd spent countless evenings at our kitchen table talking about everything and nothing. Lately, those conversations happened elsewhere, in restaurants I couldn't afford or at Lisa's apartment across town. Tell Lisa I said hello. Mira met my eyes in the mirror. I will. But something in her expression said she wouldn't. Something that looked almost like guilt, quickly covered by another layer of lipstick. I waited until her car pulled out of the driveway, then went to my sock drawer and pulled out the watch box. The receipt was tucked inside the lid. $2,147.83, paid in cash over 3 visits to the store. The sales clerk had wrapped it in silver paper with a red bow, the kind of presentation that was supposed to make Christmas morning magical. Now it felt like evidence of my own stupidity. I drove to the jewelry store in Hartford, arriving 10 minutes before closing. The same clerk who'd smiled at my romantic gesture looked confused when I explained I needed to return it. Was there a problem with the engraving? No problem. Change of plans. He examined the watch, checked his computer, and nodded. I can process the return, but there's a 15% restocking fee. That's fine. Would you like store credit? Maybe something else for your wife? I almost laughed. No, cash is good. The clerk counted out $1,900 in hundreds and twenties, then paused. We have some nice gift boxes if you need one. No charge. I looked at him more carefully. Mid-40s, wedding ring, the kind of guy who'd probably sold a lot of jewelry to men who'd later returned it. His eyes held understanding, not judgment. Yeah, I said. I could use a box. He handed me a plain white box, the kind used for returns and repairs, simple, elegant, and completely empty. "Good luck," he said. Driving home, I thought about luck and timing and the strange way life can change direction in the space of a single conversation. 3 hours ago, I'd been planning Christmas morning, imagining Mira's face when she opened her gift. Now I was carrying an empty box and a pocket full of cash, feeling like I'd just woken up from a very long dream. At home, I sat at my computer and did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. I researched divorce lawyers. The first website I found belonged to Patricia Goldman, attorney at law, specializing in family law and asset protection. Her bio mentioned 20 years of experience, a Harvard law degree, and a track record of protecting clients' interests in complex marital disputes. Her office was in Hartford, 20 minutes from my house. I read testimonials from former clients, studied Connecticut divorce law, and learned about asset division, alimony, and the legal definition of marital misconduct. The information felt surreal, like I was researching someone else's life. But when Mira came home at 11:30, smelling like wine and unfamiliar cologne, I closed the laptop and pretended to be watching television. She kissed my forehead, a quick, distracted peck, and went upstairs without asking about my evening. I stayed on the couch until midnight, then went to my office and printed divorce papers from a legal website. Standard forms for Connecticut, requiring basic information about assets, property, and grounds for dissolution. I filled them out carefully, using the same attention to detail I brought to inventory reports and customer orders. Name: Porter James Kellor. Occupation: store manager. Years of marriage: 12. Grounds for divorce: irreconcilable differences. I signed every page, dated them December 23rd, and placed them in the white gift box. On top, I put the receipt from the jewelry store, showing the returned watch and the date of purchase. Evidence of planning, of hope, of the Christmas that might have been. Then I wrapped the box in the same silver paper the clerk had used for the watch, tied it with the same red bow, and wrote Mira's name on a gift tag in my neatest handwriting. The next morning, Mira left early for last-minute shopping. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then drove to her parents' house in West Hartford. Harold and June Morrison lived in a colonial mansion that had been in their family for 3 generations, the kind of place where Christmas dinner was served on china that cost more than my monthly salary. June answered the door in a red dress and pearls, already dressed for company. She'd always been kind to me, in the polite way wealthy people are kind to service workers. "Porter, you're early, dear. Dinner isn't until 3. "Actually, I can't make it today. Family emergency." I handed her the wrapped box. But I wanted to make sure Mira got her gift. June's face showed concern. "Oh no, is everything all right?" "It will be. Could you make sure she opens this during dinner? It's important." "Of course, dear. Should I call her?" "No, don't spoil the surprise. I'll talk to her later." I drove home, packed my clothes and important documents into 2 suitcases, and loaded them into my truck. Then I called Patricia Goldman's emergency number and left a voicemail explaining that I needed to file divorce papers immediately after Christmas. At noon, I checked into a Hampton Inn 15 minutes from home and turned off my phone. For the first time in months, the silence felt peaceful instead of ominous. Christmas dinner at the Morrison house started at 3 o'clock sharp, just like every year for the past 12. I wasn't there to see Harold carve the turkey or June fuss over place settings. I wasn't there when Ty Morrison arrived at 3:30, fashionably late as always. But I was there in spirit, wrapped in silver paper with a red bow, waiting under the Christmas tree for the perfect moment to speak my truth. The Hampton Inn had cable television, decent coffee, and the kind of anonymity that felt like freedom. I spent Christmas morning watching old movies and eating vending machine breakfast, checking my phone every few minutes even though I'd turned it off. Old habits. At exactly 4 o'clock, I powered it back on, 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, 3 voicemails. The first text was from Mira, sent at 3:47 p.m. "What the hell is this?" The second, 3 minutes later, "Call me right now." The third, "Porter, this isn't funny." Then came the voicemails. Mira's voice, tight with panic. "Porter, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but we need to talk. Call me back." The second voicemail was Harold Morrison, Mira's father, using the same tone he'd used when discussing my career prospects at family dinners. "Porter, there seems to be some confusion about your intentions. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." The third was from my sister Casey. "Porter, what the hell is going on? Mira called me crying, saying you filed for divorce. Call me back." I deleted the voicemails without listening to the rest and scrolled through the text messages. Most were from Mira, progressing from anger to panic to something approaching desperation. A few were from numbers I didn't recognize, probably family members who'd witnessed whatever happened at dinner. One text stood out from Nick. "Heard through the grapevine that Christmas got interesting. Call when you're ready to talk." I called him. "Porter? Jesus, man, where are you?" "Hotel. What did you hear?" Nick's laugh carried no humor. "Lisa Hartwell called Jenny, crying about how you'd destroyed Christmas and humiliated everyone. According to her, you sent divorce papers to Mira's parents' house, and she opened them in front of the whole family." "That's accurate." "Including the ex-boyfriend?" "I assume so. I wasn't there." "Holy shit, Porter, what happened at that dinner?" I could picture the scene. The Morrison dining room with its crystal chandelier and family portraits, everyone dressed in their Christmas finest. Mira opening what she thought was an expensive gift, maybe showing off to Ty about how thoughtful her husband was. The moment she lifted the papers and saw my signature. "I don't know exactly." I turned my phone off. "Well, turn on the local news. This is going to be all over town by tomorrow." After hanging up with Nick, I drove to a diner near the hotel and ordered coffee and pie. The waitress was working Christmas Day for double pay, and the only other customers were a trucker and an elderly man reading a newspaper. Normal people living normal lives, not dealing with the wreckage of 12-year marriages. My phone rang. Mira. I answered on the 4th ring. "Hello, Mira." "Porter, where are you?" Her voice was strained like she'd been crying. "We need to talk." "I'm sure we do. How was dinner?" Silence. Then, "How could you do this? In front of my family? In front of Ty?" "Ty was there. I thought he might not show up. He brought his fiancée Porter, his pregnant fiancée, and you made me open divorce papers in front of them." Pregnant fiancée. That was an interesting development. "I didn't make you do anything. I gave you a gift. You chose to open it." "This isn't a joke!" Mira's voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My parents are furious. Ty thinks I'm insane. His fiancée asked if I was having some kind of breakdown." "Are you?" "What?" "Having a breakdown. Because from where I'm sitting, you seem pretty clear about your priorities. You wanted Christmas dinner with your ex-boyfriend. You got it. Porter, please. Come home, we can fix this." I thought about that. Coming home to our house that didn't feel like home anymore. Sitting in our kitchen while Mira explained how this was all a misunderstanding, how she'd just been confused, how we could work things out if I'd just be reasonable. "No," I said. "We can't fix this." "Porter." I hung up and turned off the phone again. The next morning, I drove to Patricia Goldman's office in Hartford. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, the kind of lawyer who probably charged by the minute and earned every penny. "Mr. Kellor, thank you for coming in. I reviewed the papers you filled out. Very thorough. I manage a hardware store. Details matter." She smiled. "Indeed they do. Now let's talk about your situation. You mentioned on the phone that your wife has been having an affair?" "I suspect it. She's been secretive, working late, meeting with her ex-boyfriend. Yesterday she uninvited me from Christmas dinner so she could spend time with him." "Do you have evidence of the affair?" "Not yet. but I'm going to get it. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Mr. Kellor, Connecticut is a no-fault divorce state. Proving adultery won't necessarily impact the financial settlement, but it can affect alimony and custody if children are involved. No kids. Assets? House, savings, my truck, her car? Nothing complicated. And you're certain you want to proceed? I thought about Mira's face when she'd told me not to come to Christmas. The casual dismissal, like I was an inconvenience to be managed. The way she'd talked about adult things I wouldn't understand. I'm certain. Then let's begin. We spent 2 hours going over paperwork, financial documents, and legal strategy. Patricia explained Connecticut divorce law, asset division, and what to expect in the coming weeks. She also gave me advice I hadn't expected. Document everything, she said. Keep records of her behavior, her whereabouts, any evidence of the affair. If this gets contentious, and it probably will, you'll want proof of everything you're claiming. How do I do that? Carefully and legally. Hire a private investigator if necessary, but don't do anything that could be construed as stalking or harassment. I left her office with a folder full of legal documents and a plan. Step 1 was already complete. I'd filed for divorce and made my intentions clear. Step 2 was gathering evidence. Step 3 was making sure everyone in our social circle knew exactly why our marriage was ending. That afternoon, I drove back to our house while Mira was at work. I needed clothes, tools, and access to our home computer. The house felt different now, like I was visiting a place I used to live. In Mira's office, I found what I was looking for: printed emails, receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, and a credit card statement showing charges I didn't recognize. Expensive dinners, hotel bars, shopping trips that corresponded with her late nights at work. But the real evidence was on her computer. Mira had always been careless about passwords, using the same combination of her maiden name and birth year for everything. Her email account was a treasure trove of correspondence with Ty Morrison, dating back 6 months. The early emails were casual. So good to hear from you. Can't believe it's been so long. Would love to catch up sometime. But they escalated quickly. By October, they were meeting for lunch. By November, the emails had turned intimate. I keep thinking about what you said. Porter doesn't understand me the way you do. I wonder what would have happened if we'd never broken up. The most recent email, sent 3 days ago. I told Porter not to come to Christmas. We'll finally have time to talk about everything. I can't wait to see you. I printed everything and saved copies to a flash drive. Then I did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. I went through Mira's dresser and closet, looking for evidence. In the back of her underwear drawer, I found lingerie I'd never seen. Expensive pieces with tags still attached, purchased from a boutique in Hartford. In her coat pocket, I found a hotel keycard from the Marriott downtown, dated 2 weeks ago. The picture was becoming clear, and it wasn't pretty. I was packing the evidence when I heard a car in the driveway. Mira, home early from work. I grabbed my folder and headed for the back door, but she was already coming through the front. Porter, I saw your truck. We need to talk. I met her in the living room, holding my folder of evidence. She looked tired, older somehow, like the stress of the last 24 hours had aged her. You're right, I said. We do need to talk. Porter, I know you're angry, but what you did yesterday was cruel. My parents are devastated. Ty's fiancée thinks I'm some kind of homewrecker. Are you? What? I opened the folder and pulled out the printed emails. Are you a homewrecker, Mira? Because these emails suggest you've been trying to break up a happy relationship. Her face went white. You went through my computer? I went through our computer, in our house, looking for evidence to support my divorce filing. Porter, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I pulled out more papers. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, lingerie purchases, 6 months of secret meetings with your ex-boyfriend while you told me you were working late. Mira sat down heavily on our couch, the the same couch where we'd watched movies and planned our future together. Now she looked like a stranger, someone I'd thought I knew but had never really understood. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. "Then explain it to me. Use small words so I can understand these adult things." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I made a mistake, Porter. Ty contacted me when he moved back to town, and I was curious. We started talking, and it brought back memories of what we used to have. So you decided to have an affair. We never slept together. Yet." The word hung in the air between us. Mira's face crumpled, and I realized she'd been planning to leave me for Ty. The Christmas dinner was supposed to be her chance to tell him she was available, to rekindle their relationship and start a new life, except Ty had brought his pregnant fiancée. "He's engaged, Mira. He's having a baby with someone else. You destroyed our marriage for a guy who's already moved on." "I know that now," she whispered. "Now you know. After 12 years of marriage, after humiliating both of us in front of your family, now you know." I stood up and headed for the door. "My lawyer will be in touch about the asset division. Don't contact me unless it's through her." "Porter, please. Can't we try counseling? Can't we work this out?" I turned back to look at my wife of 12 years sitting on our couch in our living room, crying over another man. "You told me not to come to Christmas because you wanted to talk to your ex about your relationship. You got your wish." "But he's not available. He's with someone else." "And so was I said. "Until yesterday." I walked out of our house for the last time, carrying a folder full of evidence and a strange sense of relief. The marriage was over, but at least now I knew why. As I drove back to the hotel, my phone started ringing again. Mira, probably, or her parents, or Lisa Hartwell with more accusations about my cruelty. I didn't answer. I had evidence to organize and a plan to execute. The truth was going to come out, one way or another. And everyone who'd been whispering about poor Porter and his failing marriage was about to learn exactly what had really happened. The thing about small towns is that gossip travels faster than news. By the time I got back to the hotel, my phone was buzzing with calls from people I hadn't heard from in months. Word about Christmas dinner had spread through our social circle like water through a cracked foundation. I ignored most of the calls but answered when Casey called. "Porter, what the hell is going on? Mira called me crying, saying you ambushed her with divorce papers." "That's not exactly what happened." "Then tell me what did happen, because I've got 3 different versions from 3 different people, and none of them make sense." Casey was 2 years younger than me, a nurse at Hartford General, and the only person in my family who'd never particularly liked Mira. She'd been polite at family gatherings, but I'd caught her watching my wife with the kind of professional assessment nurses use on difficult patients. "Mira's been having an affair," I said. "She uninvited me from Christmas so she could spend time with her ex-boyfriend. I filed for divorce and had the papers delivered during dinner." Silence. Then, "Jesus, Porter, are you sure about the affair? I found emails, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, 6 months' worth. And you just filed for divorce without talking to her first?" "She told me she wanted to discuss their relationship with him. What was there to talk about?" Casey sighed. "You could have confronted her privately, given her a chance to explain." "She had 6 months to explain. She chose to lie instead." "Fair point. So what happens now?" "Now I let everyone know why our marriage ended, starting with you." I spent the next hour telling Casey everything, the emails, the secret meetings, the way Mira had dismissed me as too immature to understand adult things. Casey listened without interrupting, asking clarifying questions like she was taking a patient history. "You know this is going to get ugly," she said finally. "It's already ugly. Now it's just going to be public. What do you need from me?" That was Casey. No judgment, no lectures about forgiveness or working things out. Just practical support when family needed it. "Help me spread the word. I want everyone to know the truth before Mira and Lisa start spinning stories about my mental health or midlife crisis. Consider it done. I'll call Mom and Dad tonight. After hanging up with Casey, I made a list of people who needed to hear the truth directly from me. My parents, close friends, co-workers, and the neighbors who'd probably already heard rumors. I started with my boss, Mr. Wallace. Jim Wallace had owned Henderson's Hardware for 30 years, hiring me as a part-time clerk when I was in college and promoting me to manager when he decided to semi-retire. He was in his 60s now, spending more time fishing than working, but he still came in every morning to drink coffee and complain about suppliers. Porter, I wasn't expecting to hear from you today. How was Christmas? Interesting. Jim, I need to let you know that I filed for divorce yesterday. It might affect my schedule for the next few weeks. Damn. I'm sorry to hear that. You and Mira seemed solid. We weren't. She's been having an affair for 6 months. Jim was quiet for a moment. He'd been married to the same woman for 40 years, raised 3 kids, and had strong opinions about loyalty and commitment. What do you need? He asked finally. Time off for lawyer meetings, and maybe some understanding if I'm not at my best for a while. Take whatever time you need. The store will survive. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. Porter, for what it's worth, I never thought she appreciated what she had. That was Jim Wallace. Direct, honest, and surprisingly perceptive for a guy who spent most of his time thinking about nuts and bolts. Next, I called my parents in Florida. They'd retired to Sarasota 5 years ago, trading Connecticut winters for golf courses and early bird specials. My father answered on the second ring. Porter, how was Christmas? Did Mira like the watch? Dad, I need to tell you something. I filed for divorce yesterday. The line went quiet. I could hear my mother in the background asking what was wrong. What happened? My father asked. I gave them the abbreviated version, the affair, the Christmas ultimatum, the divorce papers. My mother got on the extension halfway through, making distressed noises about marriage counseling and working things out. Mom? She chose another man over me. There's nothing to work out. But 12 years, Porter. That has to count for something. It counted for me. It didn't count for her. My father, practical as always, asked about assets and lawyers. My mother worried about holidays and family gatherings. Both promised to support whatever decision I made, which was more than I'd expected and exactly what I needed. The hardest call was to Nick. Not because he wouldn't support me, but because I knew what he was going to say. Porter, I've got to ask. Are you sure about this? Divorce is permanent. So is adultery. But if she's willing to work on the marriage, she's not. She's in love with someone else, Nick. Someone who's engaged to another woman and having a baby. She threw away our marriage for a fantasy. Nick was quiet for a long moment. What can I do to help? Help me make sure everyone knows the truth. Mira and Lisa are going to try to paint me as the bad guy, the husband who couldn't handle his wife having male friends. Leave that to me. Jenny knows half the women in town. By tomorrow, everyone will know exactly what happened. That was the thing about having good friends. They didn't waste time on judgment or lectures. They just asked what you needed and figured out how to provide it. By evening, I'd made 8 phone calls and sent a dozen text messages. The truth was spreading through our social circle like ripples in a pond, reaching people who'd probably been wondering about Mira's behavior for months. My phone rang around 9 o'clock. Lisa Hartwell. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Lisa had been Mira's closest friend for 15 years, her maid of honor, her partner in crime. If anyone was going to defend Mira's behavior, it would be Lisa. Porter, we need to talk. Hello, Lisa. How was Christmas dinner? You know how it was. You ruined it. I gave my wife a gift. She chose to open it in front of everyone. You humiliated her, in front of her family, in front of Ty and his fiancée. Ty brought his fiancée? That must have been awkward for Mira. Lisa's voice got sharper. You planned this, didn't you? You knew he'd bring someone else. Actually, I hadn't known that. But it was interesting that Lisa thought I might have. Lisa, did you know about the affair? Silence. You did know. You helped her cover it up. It wasn't an affair. They were just talking. About what? Their relationship. Their feelings. Whether they'd made the right choices. That's not friendship, Lisa. That's emotional adultery. You're being ridiculous. Mira loves you. Mira loves the idea of financial security and social respectability. She loves Ty. She settled for me. That's not true. Then why did she choose him over me for Christmas dinner? Why did she lie about working late while she was meeting him in hotels? Why did she buy lingerie for someone who wasn't her husband? Another silence. Longer this time. Porter, people make mistakes. Marriage is about forgiveness. Marriage is about loyalty, Lisa. About choosing your spouse over other people, especially ex-boyfriends. Mira made her choice. Now I'm making mine. She wants to work things out. She wants to avoid the consequences of her choices. There's a difference. I hung up before Lisa could respond. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with text messages from mutual friends, asking if what they'd heard was true. I confirmed the basic facts and referred them to my lawyer for anything else. The next morning, I drove to Henderson's Hardware for the first time since Christmas Eve. Jim Wallace was already there, drinking coffee and reading the Hartford Courant. "Morning, Porter. How are you holding up?" "Better than expected. Any word from the gossip network?" Jim smiled. "Jenny Brennan stopped by yesterday evening, bought a pack of screws she didn't need and filled me in on the local drama. According to her, half the town is talking about your Christmas surprise." "What are they saying?" "Mixed reactions. Some people think you're a genius. Others think you went too far." "And you?" Jim studied me over his coffee cup. "I think you did what you had to do. Sometimes the truth needs a dramatic entrance to get people's attention." We opened the store at 8 and had a steady stream of customers all morning. Most were regulars buying legitimate supplies, but a few were clearly there for gossip. Mrs. Henderson from Maple Street bought a single light bulb and spent 20 minutes asking about my situation. Tom Bradley, who owned the auto parts store down the street, stopped by to offer support and share his own divorce story from 10 years ago. "Best thing I ever did," he said. "Scary at first, but you'll be amazed how much better life gets when you're not walking on eggshells all the time." Around noon, Mira showed up. She looked terrible. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. She walked into the store like she was approaching a crime scene, looking around nervously before spotting me behind the counter. "Porter, we need to talk." "This isn't the place, Mira." "Then where? You won't come home. You won't answer my calls. Call my lawyer." "I'm not talking to lawyers. I'm talking to my husband." Her voice was loud enough to carry through the store. 2 customers stopped browsing and turned to watch. Jim Wallace emerged from the back office, took one look at the situation, and positioned himself near the register. "You filed for divorce, Mira. I'm not your husband anymore. I'm your soon-to-be ex-husband." "Porter, please. I made a mistake. I got confused about my feelings, but I never actually did anything with Ty." "You had an emotional affair for 6 months. You lied to me repeatedly. You chose him over me for Christmas dinner." "Because I needed closure. I needed to understand what I was feeling." "And what did you learn?" Mira's face crumpled. "That he's not available. That he never was. That I threw away my marriage for nothing." "You didn't throw it away for nothing. You threw it away for him. The fact that he didn't want you doesn't change your choice." "But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work on our communication." "Mira, stop." I came around the counter and faced her directly. "You spent 6 months planning to leave me for another man. The only reason you want to work things out now is because he rejected you." "That's not true. Isn't it? If Ty had shown up alone yesterday, if he'd told you he wanted to be with you, would you be here right now?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Go home, Mira. Call my lawyer if you want to discuss asset division. Otherwise, leave me alone." She stood there for another moment, tears streaming down her face, then turned and walked out. The customers who'd been watching pretended to resume shopping, but I could feel their attention like heat from a furnace. Jim Wallace walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." And surprisingly, I was. For the first time in months, I felt like I was standing on solid ground instead of shifting sand. The marriage was over, the truth was spreading, and I was finally free to start figuring out what came next. That evening, I sat in my hotel room and made a decision. Tomorrow, I was going to stop hiding and start rebuilding. I had a life to reclaim, and I was going to do it publicly, proudly, and without apology. Mira had made her choice. Now, everyone was going to see the consequences. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to Rosie's diner for breakfast. Rosie's was the kind of place where local contractors grabbed coffee before work, where retirees gathered to solve the world's problems, and where everyone knew everyone else's business before the newspaper hit the stands. I walked in at 7:30 and took a seat at the counter. Within 5 minutes, 3 different people had stopped by to offer support, ask questions, or share their own relationship disasters. By 8 o'clock, I'd heard 2 divorce stories, one tale of suspected infidelity and a detailed analysis of modern marriage from Betty Kowalski, who'd been widowed for 15 years and had strong opinions about everything. "That wife of yours never appreciated what she had," Betty declared, refilling my coffee cup without being asked. "Always seemed like she thought she was too good for this town." "She's from this town, Betty." Being from somewhere and belonging somewhere are 2 different things. She belonged in one of those fancy suburbs where people care more about appearances than character. Betty had a point. Mira had always talked about moving to a better neighborhood, buying a bigger house, joining the country club where her parents were members. I'd assumed it was normal ambition, the desire for a comfortable life. Now I wondered if it was dissatisfaction with the life we'd built together. My phone buzzed. Text from Nick. "Meet me at Murphy's tonight. Jenny wants to hear the whole story." Murphy's Pub was the local gathering spot for people our age, the place where we'd celebrated promotions, birthdays, and Friday nights for the past 15 years. I hadn't been there in months, not since Mira had started working late and declined invitations to join our friends. I texted back, "What time?" 7. "Fair warning, half the town will probably be there." Perfect. It was time to stop hiding and start living again. I spent the day at work, dealing with the usual post-holiday rush of customers returning gifts and starting home improvement projects. The steady rhythm of retail work was comforting, familiar in a way that my personal life hadn't been for months. Around 3 o'clock, my lawyer called. "Mr. Kellor, I've heard from your wife's attorney. She wants to discuss reconciliation." "Not interested." "I advised her counsel that you were proceeding with the divorce. She's also requesting mediation for asset division." "Fine, as long as it moves things along. There's one more thing. Her attorney mentioned that she's prepared to provide evidence of your erratic behavior if this goes to trial." I laughed. "What kind of evidence?" "Apparently, delivering divorce papers to a family gathering constitutes psychological abuse in her opinion." "And in your opinion?" "In my opinion, it was dramatic, but legal. Connecticut is a no-fault state, Mr. Kellor. Her feelings about your timing won't affect the settlement." "Good. What's our next step?" "I'll schedule mediation for next week. In the meantime, document any contact she attempts. If she's claiming erratic behavior, we want to show that you're acting rationally and responsibly." After work, I stopped by my house to pick up more clothes and check the mail. Mira's car wasn't in the driveway, which was a relief. I wasn't ready for another public confrontation. Inside, the house felt like a museum of our marriage. Wedding photos on the mantel, vacation souvenirs on the bookshelf. 12 years of shared memories that now felt like evidence of a lie. I packed another suitcase and left without looking back. Murphy's pub was crowded when I arrived at 7. Nick and Jenny had claimed a table near the back, and I could see familiar faces scattered throughout the room. Word had definitely gotten around. "Porter!" Jenny Brennan stood up and hugged me like I'd just returned from war. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected." Jenny was a social worker, trained to read people and situations. She studied my face with professional interest. "You look better than you have in months." "Thanks, I think." "She means it," Nick said. "You've been walking around like a ghost for the past year. Now you look like yourself again." We ordered drinks and food, and I found myself relaxing for the first time in days. This was what I'd missed: easy conversation with people who knew me, who didn't require performance or pretense. "So," Jenny said, "we heard about Christmas dinner. Lisa Hartwell called my sister, crying about how you'd destroyed everything." Lisa knew about the affair? According to my sister, Lisa's been covering for Mira for months, providing alibis, making excuses, helping her meet this Ty character. That explains a lot. "It gets better," Nick added. "Turns out Ty's fiancée is from Hartford. Her family knows the Morrisons. When she heard about the Christmas drama, she did some investigating of her own." "What kind of investigating?" Jenny leaned forward conspiratorially. "She found out that Ty's been telling people he was single. No mention of a pregnant fiancée. No mention of any serious relationship. So he was lying to Mira? And to his fiancée about Mira? According to the Family Gossip Network, this woman Jessica is furious. She's threatening to leave him unless he cuts all contact with Mira and anyone else he's been lying about." I absorbed this information slowly. Ty had been playing both women, keeping his options open while building a life with someone else. Mira had destroyed our marriage for a man who'd never had any intention of leaving his fiancée. "How do you know all this?" "Small town," Jenny said. "Jessica's cousin works at the bank with my sister. The cousin heard the whole story at their family dinner yesterday." "So Mira knows?" "If she doesn't, she will soon. Word is that Jessica confronted Ty yesterday evening. He confessed to the emotional affair and promised to end all contact with Mira." I felt a strange mixture of vindication and pity. Vindication because the truth was coming out. Pity because Mira was about to learn that her great love affair had been a one-sided fantasy. "There's more," Nick said. "Tom Bradley heard from his ex-wife that Mira's been calling around, trying to find people who will say you've been acting strangely lately." "What kind of strangely?" "Controlling, jealous, possibly unstable. She's building a case that you're having some kind of breakdown." "Based on what evidence?" "Based on the fact that you filed for divorce instead of accepting her affair quietly." Jenny shook her head. "She actually told Lisa that you should have been more understanding about her need to explore her feelings. Explore her feelings with another man. While lying to you about it for 6 months. While meeting him in hotels and buying lingerie for their dates." "Jesus," Nick muttered. "I knew she was self-centered, but this is next-level narcissism." We talked for 2 hours, and I found myself feeling lighter with each conversation. These were my people, the friends who'd known me for years and could see through Mira's attempts to rewrite history. They'd witnessed our marriage, watched it deteriorate, and understood why I'd made the choices I had. Around 9 o'clock, the pub door opened and Lisa Hartwell walked in with 2 women I didn't recognize. She scanned the room, spotted our table, and whispered something to her companions. All 3 women stared at me with the kind of hostile curiosity usually reserved for traffic accidents. "Incoming," Jenny murmured. Lisa approached our table with the confidence of someone who believed she held the moral high ground. "Porter, I need to talk to you." "Hello, Lisa. How's Mira?" "She's devastated. She's been crying for 3 days straight." "That's unfortunate. You destroyed her life." "Actually, She did that herself. I just made it public. Lisa's face flushed. You humiliated her in front of her entire family. She humiliated herself by having an affair. I just documented it. It wasn't an affair. They never slept together. Lisa, Jenny interrupted, emotional affairs are still affairs. Lying to your spouse about secret meetings with an ex-boyfriend is still betrayal. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it, I said. Explain how 6 months of secret emails, hotel meetings, and lies about working late constitutes innocent friendship. Lisa looked around the table, realizing she was outnumbered. Mira was confused about her feelings. She needed time to figure things out. She had 12 years to figure things out. She chose to figure them out with another man instead of her husband. She wants to work things out now. Now that Ty's fiancée threatened to leave him. Now that he's cut all contact with her. How convenient. Lisa's mouth dropped open. She hadn't known about Jessica's ultimatum. That's right, Lisa. Ty chose his pregnant fiancée over Mira, just like Mira chose Ty over me. The only difference is that I'm not begging for a second chance. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. There's a difference. Lisa stood there for another moment, then turned and walked back to her friends. I could see them whispering urgently, probably trying to process this new information about Ty's situation. Well, Nick said, that was entertaining. Poor Lisa, Jenny added. She's probably just now realizing that she helped destroy a marriage for nothing. She'll get over it, they both will. But as I watched Lisa and her friends leave the pub, I wondered if that was true. Mira had spent 6 months building a fantasy about reuniting with her college boyfriend, and Lisa had helped her maintain that fantasy. Now they both had to face the reality that it had never been real. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Friends stopped by our table to offer support or share their own relationship stories. By closing time, I'd talked to a dozen people and felt more connected to my community than I had in months. Driving back to the hotel, I realized something had shifted. I was no longer the victim of Mira's betrayal. I was the protagonist of my own life again. The divorce was moving forward. The truth was spreading, and I was surrounded by people who supported my decision. Tomorrow, I would start looking for my own apartment. Next week, I would begin mediation with Mira's lawyer. In a few months, I would be officially single for the first time in 12 years. For the first time since Christmas Eve, that prospect felt like freedom instead of loss. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in Patricia Goldman's office for our final meeting before mediation when she handed me a document that changed everything. Your wife's attorney sent this over yesterday, she said. It's interesting. The document was a psychological evaluation request, filed by Mira's lawyer and signed by Dr. Richard Hoffman, a psychiatrist I'd never heard of. According to the paperwork, Mira was requesting a court-ordered mental health assessment based on my increasingly erratic and potentially dangerous behavior. I read through the allegations twice, trying to process what I was seeing. According to Mira's statement, I had exhibited obsessive surveillance behavior by monitoring her communications, demonstrated calculated psychological manipulation by timing the divorce papers for maximum emotional damage, shown potential for escalation by publicly humiliating her in front of family, displayed concerning detachment by refusing to discuss reconciliation. This is insane, I said finally. It's also poorly researched, Patricia replied. Dr. Hoffman is known for taking cases that other psychiatrists won't touch. He's been censured twice by the state medical board for questionable evaluations. So what does this mean? It means your wife is desperate. When someone files for a psychological evaluation in a divorce case, they're usually trying to gain leverage for asset division or custody arrangements. Since you don't have children, she's probably hoping to paint you as unstable enough to warrant supervised visitation or reduced alimony claims. Can she do that? She can try. but Connecticut family courts have seen this tactic before. Judges don't appreciate spouses who weaponize mental health allegations unless there's genuine evidence of danger. Patricia pulled out another folder. Fortunately, we have evidence of our own. I've been documenting your behavior since you hired me, and I've spoken with your employer, your sister, and several friends. Everyone describes you as rational, responsible, and appropriately upset about your wife's affair. What's our next move? We request our own evaluation from Dr. Sarah Chen, a well-respected psychiatrist who specializes in divorce-related assessments. We also file a motion to dismiss your wife's request based on lack of evidence. How long will that take? 2 to 3 weeks. In the meantime, continue documenting any contact your wife attempts. If she's claiming you're unstable, we want to show that she's the one engaging in erratic behavior. That afternoon, I drove to my new apartment for the first time. After 2 weeks of hotel living, I'd found a 2-bedroom place in a complex near the hardware store. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, affordable, and completely mine. I was carrying boxes upstairs when my phone rang. Unknown number. Porter, this is Jessica Morrison, Ty's fiancée. I almost dropped the box. How did you get this number? From your sister. I hope you don't mind, but I really need to talk to you. About what? About Ty and Mira. About what really happened between them. Jessica Morrison turned out to be nothing like what I'd expected. When she arrived at my apartment an hour later, I was prepared for a confrontation with the woman who'd stolen my wife's fantasy boyfriend. Instead, I met a sharp, professional woman in her late 20s who looked as tired as I felt. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said, settling into one of my 2 chairs. "I know this is awkward. That's one word for it. I need you to know that I had no idea about Mira until Christmas dinner. Ty told me he was visiting old friends, not pursuing a relationship with a married woman. What changed your mind?" Jessica pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "I found these on his phone after we left your in-laws' house. 6 months of conversations with your wife, including plans to meet while I was out of town." The messages were worse than the emails I'd found on Mira's computer. Ty had been actively encouraging her dissatisfaction with our marriage, telling her she deserved better, suggesting that they were meant to be together, despite the timing. "I'm sorry," I said. "You didn't deserve this either." "No, I didn't. But I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because I think you should know the whole truth about what they were planning." Jessica pulled out printed emails and showed me conversations I'd never seen. Messages between Ty and Mira, discussing divorce timelines, asset division, and their plans for a future together. They'd been planning our breakup for months, waiting for the right moment to make their move. "Christmas dinner was supposed to be Mira's announcement," Jessica said. "She was going to tell her family that she was leaving you for Ty, and he was going to support her decision. But you showed up. But I showed up. Pregnant, engaged, and completely unaware that my fiancé was planning to leave me for his college girlfriend." I stared at the evidence, feeling a mixture of anger and relief. Anger at the depth of their deception. Relief that I'd acted when I did instead of waiting for them to blindside me. What happened after dinner? I confronted Ty that night. He confessed everything, begged me to forgive him, promised it was just a fantasy that got out of hand. He claimed he never intended to actually leave me. "Do you believe him?" Jessica laughed bitterly. "I believe he's a coward who wanted to keep his options open until the last possible moment. When you forced his hand with the divorce papers, he chose the safer option. And now? Now I'm planning my own exit strategy. I can't marry someone who was actively planning to abandon me for another woman." We talked for another hour, sharing information and trying to make sense of the elaborate deception our partners had constructed. Jessica was smart, articulate, and surprisingly sympathetic to my situation. "There's something else you should know," she said as she prepared to leave. "Mira called Ty yesterday, begging him to reconsider. She offered to wait until after the baby was born, to be patient while he figured out his priorities. What did he tell her? He told her it was over, that he couldn't risk losing his child for a relationship that might not work out. So she's lost everything. So have I. The difference is that I'm not trying to destroy an innocent person to make myself feel better. After Jessica left, I sat in my empty apartment thinking about the conversation. Mira hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been planning to leave me for months, calculating the best way to end our marriage and start a new life with Ty. The Christmas ultimatum hadn't been about closure or understanding her feelings. It had been about executing a plan that fell apart when Ty's pregnant fiancée showed up unexpectedly. My phone rang. Patricia Goldman. "Porter, I have news. Your wife's attorney just called. They're withdrawing the psychological evaluation request." "Why?" "Because Dr. Chen completed her preliminary assessment and found no evidence of mental instability. In fact, her report describes you as appropriately responsive to marital betrayal and rational in your decision-making process." "What does that mean for the divorce?" "It means we proceed with mediation as planned. Your wife's attempt to paint you as unstable has backfired, and her lawyer knows it." "When do we meet?" "Tomorrow at 10. Be prepared for one final attempt at reconciliation. When the psychological angle failed, desperate spouses usually try emotional manipulation." The mediation office was in a generic business complex in West Hartford, the kind of place where lawyers and accountants helped people navigate life's legal complications. I arrived early and found Patricia reviewing documents in the parking lot. "Ready for this?" she asked. "More than ready." Mira was already inside with her lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She'd lost weight since Christmas, and her usually perfect appearance showed signs of stress. When I walked in, she looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Porter," she said quietly. "Mira." The mediator, a middle-aged woman named Susan Clark, explained the process and ground rules. We would discuss asset division, debt responsibility, and any other matters related to dissolving the marriage. Personal grievances were not relevant to the legal proceedings. "Let's start with the house," Susan said. "It's valued at $420,000, with a remaining mortgage of $180,000. "I want to keep the house," Mira said immediately. "Based on what?" Patricia asked. "Mr. Kellor has been making the mortgage payments and maintaining the property. It's my family home. I grew up in this neighborhood." "You grew up in your parents' house 3 miles away," I said. "We bought this house together with money I saved." Mira's lawyer whispered something in her ear. She nodded reluctantly. "My client is willing to buy out Mr. Kellor's interest in the property," he said. "With what money?" Patricia asked. "Mrs. Kellor's salary won't qualify for a mortgage large enough to buy out her husband's equity. Her parents are willing to provide financial assistance." I almost laughed. Of course, Harold and June Morrison would bail out their daughter, just like they'd been doing her entire life. But I had a better idea. "I want the house sold," I said. "We'll split the proceeds according to our contributions." "Porter, please," Mira said, speaking directly to me for the first time. "That house is our home. It's where we built our life together. You destroyed that life when you decided to build a new one with Ty Morrison." "I made a mistake. I know that now." "Mrs. Kellor," Susan interrupted, "personal matters are not relevant to asset division. We're here to discuss financial arrangements. We spent 3 hours dividing 12 years of shared property. The house would be sold, with proceeds split equally after mortgage and selling costs. Retirement accounts would be divided according to contribution percentages. Debts would be allocated based on who incurred them. The process was clinical, reducing our marriage to a spreadsheet of assets and liabilities. But it was also liberating, like finally cleaning out a closet that had been cluttered for years. "There's one final matter," Mira's lawyer said as we prepared to leave. "My client would like to make a personal statement." Susan looked at me. "Mr. Kellor, You're not required to listen to personal statements. I'll listen. Mira stood up, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. Porter, I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices and destroyed your trust. But we had 12 good years together. That has to count for something. I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and tried to find some remnant of the woman I'd fallen in love with 13 years ago. The woman who'd laughed at my jokes, supported my dreams, and made me believe in the possibility of lasting happiness. You're right, I said finally. We did have 12 good years, but you threw them away for 6 months of fantasy, with a man who was never going to choose you over his real life. I know that now. You knew it then too. You just didn't care enough about our marriage to stop. Porter, please, can't we try again? Can't we go to counseling and work through this? I stood up and gathered my papers. Mira, you spent 6 months planning to leave me for another man. You lied to me every day, met him in hotels, and bought lingerie for your dates. You uninvited me from Christmas so you could announce your new relationship to your family. But it didn't work out. Because he chose someone else, not because you realized you loved me. I do love you. You love the security I provided. You love the idea of not having to start over. But you don't love me enough to have chosen me over him when you thought he was available. Mira started crying, the kind of desperate tears that come when someone realizes they've lost everything through their own choices. But I felt nothing except a profound sense of closure. The papers will be filed next week, Patricia told her lawyer. The divorce will be final in 60 days. Outside in the parking lot, Patricia shook my hand. How do you feel? Free, I said. For the first time in months, I feel completely free. That evening, I sat in my new apartment and opened a beer. Tomorrow, I would go back to work at Henderson's Hardware. Next week, I would start looking for a house of my own. In 2 months, I would be officially single and ready to start the next chapter of my life. Mira had made her choice on Christmas Eve, prioritizing her ex-boyfriend over our marriage. I had made mine on Christmas Day, prioritizing my self-respect over her regret. Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the truth, even when it comes wrapped in divorce papers and tied with a red bow. The marriage was over, the lies were exposed, and for the first time in 12 years, I was exactly where I belonged, free to choose my own future without worrying about someone else's hidden agenda. The divorce gift had been delivered, opened, and accepted by everyone who mattered. Now it was time to unwrap the rest of my life.